Shabbat shalom to both of you. Shabbat shalom. I'm sorry again.
You can let it go.
All right, cool. And you can be seated. Who here has had the experience of watching a movie as a child and then going back? Yeah, thank you, those of you who had a childhood that had movies. Thank you for jumping in immediately to let me know that your childhood had movies. Who here has watched a movie as a childhood and then come back and watched it again as an adult? Thank you. And different things revealed themselves to you. Who can give me an example? Tell me the movie and tell me what you remember as a kid versus as an adult. Go ahead, Simcha. Whose childhood included movies? We are meant to understand.
My mom tried to show me Fiddler on the Roof when I was a child.
Okay.
And I was so absolutely terrified of the scene where he's describing the dream about the ghost.
Okay.
That I refused to finish the movie.
Okay, Fiddler on the Roof as a child, the ghost dream scene was terrifying, and now as an adult.
It's kind of a silly scene. It's not. I mean, I did the same thing with Young Frankenstein. Had nightmares for years. As an adult, kind of a silly movie.
Okay.
I've learned something.
Okay, so that scene in Fiddler on the Roof with the ghost, the dream about the ghost, and that it terrifying as a child, but then as an adult, it's like, what's the word? Silly,
Yes.
Goofy, kind of. So this idea of fear playing itself out differently as a kid versus when you were an adult. What else? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, for me, it was The Wizard of Oz.
Ah, The Wizard of Oz. I thought that might come up for somebody.
And it was the monkeys.
The monkeys.
I was like hysterical, and I couldn't watch the rest of the movie. And I was probably 7 or 8.
Okay.
I had a very young mom, and she wouldn't have been more than, at the time, 31 or 30. And to her credit, she was just like, okay, if you're afraid, we won't watch it anymore. And then when I was older and watched it, I was like, okay, this is like ridiculous that I was afraid of it, but I was truly petrified of those monkeys.
The fear of the monkey scene, and we have in The Wizard of Oz, and we have a couple of other takers for that one. Let me ask it a little bit differently, since we've got two examples of the fear of it. Has anybody seen a movie that, as a kid, that kind of just, it was fine, it washed over you, whatever, but then you saw it again as an adult, and you're like, oh, I didn't even realize.
Well, to use that same scene.
Yeah, to use the same scene of the monkeys, yeah.
Scene. When I looked at it later, I was like, that's all the things in your life that come at you constantly. The things that can distract you, the things that can tempt you, the things that can really, impact your life.
Thank you, Tom. So now we have a revaluing of the monkey scene in The Wizard of Oz from being terrifying to being silly to actually being some kind of an approximation of what life is like, being bombarded by all of the stuff and the things and the details and all of it at the same time. Wow, an interesting... Okay, so now we've gone to 3 different phases with one scene. Yeah, go ahead, August. Is it about the monkeys?
No.
Okay, not the monkeys. Thank you.
But it's the first movie I thought of, and then Simcha mentioned being scared as a child, and then looking back, it's silly. Coraline, as a child, is wonderful.
Coraline?
Coraline.
Okay.
So it's a book, and then Tim Burton did the movie.
Okay.
And there's this little girl. She hates her life. She's like, my parents suck. She goes to this alternate dimension, and life is amazing and wonderful, but really it's very much not. But as a kid, you're like, this is amazing and wonderful. And then watching it back, it's horrifying. Horrifying. So.
I appreciate that. A movie that you watched as a child and thought, isn't this nice? And then you return to it as an adult and think, wow, this is broadly problematic. That was my experience of watching Disney's The Jungle Book, in point of fact. One that, when I was a little kid, what a delight. And then I came back and saw it, and, oh, this is really remarkably problematic, and this doesn't age well one bit. Boy, that's troubling. Avi, is that yeah? Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of movies that as a kid I just took them like as completely fictional, and then like as an adult I realized that it actually does like connect to the real world. Like for example, like a lot of Pixar movies, and also the Lorax movie. Like as a kid I thought it was just kind of some dystopian kind of thing, and then as an adult I'm like, oh wow, that's actually like stuff that's already happening. They're kind of warning us about if that continues, you know.
So that's the interesting thing about literature, and that's a great jump off to where I'm headed with us tonight. This idea of watching a movie that is fiction when you're a kid, but then you realize even though it was and may be fiction, there's also an element of it that is true. Not because it's a true story, not because it is factual in nature, but because there is some kind of truth to the human experience or condition that it is conveying. And so suddenly the thing that was fictional isn't as whimsical or lighthearted anymore. I ask all of this about all these movies because I'm thinking about what it means to turn and to return to something. As we are in this week's parsha, Eikev, in Deuteronomy, we get retellings of a few different incidents that transpire earlier in the story of the Israelites. And I wanted to use Eikev actually as a jump-off point for thinking more broadly about Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy. What's the book in Hebrew, somebody? Devarim, thank you. What does Devarim mean? Words, things, stuff. Depends on if you're translating more in an ancient Hebrew idiom versus a modern Hebrew one, the book of stuff, Devarim. What does Deuteronomy mean? Yes, Simcha.
Isn't it the second?
Deutero to nomos.
The second telling.
I thought it was the second telling. It's like Mishnah, but wow.
They review all the laws.
That's right. It's the second telling of the law. See, all of those were basically right on. And it contains with it a whole bunch of recapping, turning, and returning to things. The archaeological history of Devarim, there is a place in which, I believe it's under King Hezekiah in the 600s BCE, when they are doing some spring cleaning around the temple, and turn up, hey look, here's a scroll of the Torah that we hadn't found before. Here's Devarim. We lost it, but we found it again, thank God. Devarim, we do understand, came a little bit later to the canon of the 5 books, and if we are thinking about this process and act of canonization, of redaction, and what's in and what's out, Deuteronomy makes the grade. It's part of the 5 books. But what do you get from going back and rewatching the movie? What do you get from going back and seeing it? Carol. You look at it in a completely different way. The stories, what happens, what transpires. If you go back and you tell it again and have a second look at it, it's almost impossible for it to sit with you the way it did before. Now, this is an interesting trick about, I've heard this is a thing about human memory. Once read that memory is shockingly, startlingly, markedly unreliable. I don't know who here has heard that before. It's the reason police lineups are famously inaccurate, so to speak. But I was reading a piece in a journal, this was some years ago, that was talking about memory and stipulating that there was some evidence to suggest that the very act of remembering something distorts the memory itself. That to remember something, just going back and remembering it, it's now sitting differently in your skull than it did before. That to me is a fascinating idea. This idea that you can't have a perfect, hermetically sealed idea about something. That even just going back and remembering it actually changes it in your mind. And then you go back and remember it again, changes it again. Couldn't tell you what the changes are, but the idea was that there are little tiny distortions in terms of some of the details, some of the fine points, some of what it might have felt like, looked like, smelled like, whatever. But little tiny tweaks that alter it. So Deuteronomy becomes an even more interesting postmodern thing if you're going to tack us somewhere on the timeline. We have some of these original stories of Moses and the Torah. Then we go back in Deuteronomy and we retell them and remember them. But then we here in this room keep turning back to it ourselves. And we have it written down such that we can't fully distort it. So we're altering it, but we're not altering it, but we're altering it again, but it's not alterable. There's a funny dance of memory that's going on with Deuteronomy, I want to suggest. And I want to suggest that perhaps that dance with Deuteronomy is part of how we take a bunch of events that are the story of us and God, and we can somehow move them from being God's story and God's purpose and God's things and all of that, and move it a little bit over into our bucket such that we can own it differently. By remembering it differently, we get to own it differently. So I want to suggest here that Deuteronomy, the entire process of it, entire enterprise that is Deuteronomy, and I think it is an enterprise rather than just a scroll, the entire enterprise of it, I think, has a little bit to do with revaluing, rethinking, retelling, remembering, but in that act, making it our own. And while we can't distort it by every subsequent telling of it, because it's not a purely oral tradition, we have it written down, after all, it's been written down for a long time, I think the fact that we have a retelling of it is an invitation to the Jewish exegetical project. And by that I mean interpretation. And by that I mean this idea that you don't just read what's on the page, you actually open it and see what it means and how it resonates and reverberates with you in the world. It's not just what Deuteronomy says. Deuteronomy is giving us a way of actually being in the Torah. It's more than just a collection of stories or a retelling them. It becomes an approach, a system. This idea that lo bashamayim hi, it doesn't exist in heaven. It's actually ours to tell and to retell. And maybe it gets a little distorted, and maybe it changes and gets a little warpy and wavy in places, and maybe it gets really different from the way that it was told back then. But it's ours. And because it's ours, it gets to live and breathe in our generation. And it gives me faith that it'll live and breathe in generations far beyond my lifetime. So happy Deuteronomy, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.